everyone, this is Maria Horat, California real estate broker with Gold Country Properties. And in today's video, we're talking about one of the most critical and often misunderstood sets of disclosures in California real estate. And these are the wildfire and home hardening disclosures. If you're selling a property in a high or very high fire hazard area, these forms are not optional. They are required by law, and they protect both the buyer and seller from major risks. Let's talk about what they are, when they apply, and why they matter more than ever. Are you or someone you love ready to downsize, or thinking about selling a home but overwhelmed by years of accumulated belongings? My name is Maria Horat, and I am a real estate broker and estate sale liquidator, and my team makes the process simple and stress-free. We'll help you turn treasures into cash with professional estate sales. Prepare your home for market fast and for top value. You don't need to juggle multiple companies. We are your one-stop solution to real estate and estate sale liquidation services. Call us today and let's make your downsizing and selling process smooth, profitable, and stress-free. Let's talk about why fire disclosures exist. Wildfires are a serious issue across California, from the Sierra foothills to Southern California canyons. Because of repeated fire disasters, the state strengthens disclosure laws to make sure buyers are aware of the property's fire risk and what has or hasn't been done to reduce that risk. These forms help buyers make informed decisions and help sellers avoid future liability for non-disclosure. Even if a home has never been damaged by a fire, it might sit inside a state responsibility area or a very high fire hazard severity zone, and that triggers specific disclosures requirements. So let's now talk about the required fire disclosure forms. So let's go over the two main fire-related disclosure forms every seller in a fire zone needs to know. The first one is the Fire Hardening and Defensible Space Advisory Disclosure and Addendum. That seems like a mouthful of words, but this form became mandatory in 2021 for homes built before 2010 and that are located in a high or very high fire hazard zone. And you will know that by getting a report called the Natural Hazard Disclosure Report. Your agent, if you are in a zone that is a high fire hazard zone, will know whether you need to fill this form or not. It includes two parts: an advisory section explaining fire risk and defensible space flaws, and a disclosure section where the seller states whether they have done any home hardening improvements, such as ember-resistant vents, non-combustible roofs and decks, clearing vegetation within 5 feet of the home. And if the seller doesn't know the answers, that's okay, but they must still complete the form truthfully. The buyer then signs it to acknowledge the risk and requirements. The next one, of course, as I mentioned, is the Natural Hazard Disclosure Report, which is required on every California residential sale, trust or not. It identifies whether the property lies in a very high fire hazard severity zone, a state responsibility area, or other natural hazard zones like flood or earthquake areas. If the natural hazard disclosure shows the home in one of these fire zones, then this form, the fire hardening disclosure form, becomes mandatory as part of your disclosure package. Let's talk about specifically about how to fill or complete the fire hardening form correctly. Again, this form is required for properties that are 1 to 4 residential units when the home was built, if the home was built before January 1st, 2010, and if the property is located in a very high or very high fire hazard severity zone as identified in your natural hazard disclosure report. If all these apply, this form must be completed and provided to the buyer before the close of escrow. So when we look at the Fire Hardening and Defensible Space Advisory, Part 1, the first section is informational, and it explains why fire hardening is important and the difference between a state responsibility area and local responsibility area and what defensible space means. There is nothing to fill out here, but make sure that the buyer receives this advisory portion as is part of the required disclosure. Then part 2 is the seller disclosure of home hardening features, where The seller will check yes or no or unknown for a list of property features that can make the property home resistant to wildfires. You'll see questions like, does the roof have non-combustible coverings such as tile, metal, or composition shingles? Are the eaves, surface, and vents constructed to resist the entry embers? Are rain gutters covered with metal or non-combustible guards? Are windows dual pane or tempered glass? Are deck, fences, and siding made of ignition-resistant materials? Is the area within 5 feet of the home free of combustible material like wood, mulch, or fencing? If you know the answer, check the box. If you're unsure, it's fine to mark unknown. What matters the most here is being truthful about what you know. Your real estate agent can help clarify terms, but you as the seller are the one making these disclosures based on your personal knowledge. Part 3 talks about defensible space compliance. And this section asks whether the property complies with local defensible space laws, usually requiring clearance of vegetation within 30 to 100 feet of the home. So here's what to know. If the home is in a state responsibility area, CAL FIRE may require a defensible space inspection report before the close of escrow. If you already have a clearance certificate, you can attach the copy. If no inspection has been completed, you can check no or unknown, and the buyer might need to agree to complete the inspection within a year from closing. Then the last part, which is number 4. And I want to go back to number 3 because basically you're not required to obtain the certification unless you check that you want to be the one responsible for obtaining the certification. So if you are unsure or you haven't received the certification, the buyer upon close of escrow has 1 year to get the certification completed from CAL FIRE. Then part 4 is the signatures. Both seller and buyer must sign and date the form. The seller signs to confirm the information provided, and buyer signs to acknowledge receipt and understanding. Once signed, this form becomes part of your disclosure package, and just like the transfer disclosure statement and the natural hazard statement, this will be part of that as well. So some tips for completing this form, just to review. Number 1, you want to review your natural hazard disclosure report first. It tells you if the property is in a fire hazard zone. You want to walk around your home and take notes before you fill out the form. Keep receipts or photos of fire hardening improvements. If you're not sure about a feature, it's better to mark unknown than to guess incorrectly. And if CAL FIRE has inspected your property, you must attach a report to your disclosure package. Another disclosure that is required is called the California Wildfire Advisory, and I'm going to explain what it is and why it matters. The California Wildfire Advisory is an informational notice, not a disclosure that you fill out, but it must be given to the buyer whenever the property is located in a state responsibility area or very high fire hazard severity zone. The advisor explained why wildfire risk is higher in these areas and what property owners can do to reduce that risk through fire hardening, defensible space, and proper maintenance. What it tells buyers is the advisory outlines the increased wildfire danger in certain regions, the importance of creating defensible space, the use of fire-resistant construction material, and the buyer responsibilities to maintain compliance with local prevention laws. There's also a reference to CAL FIRE resources where buyers can learn more about fire hazard maps and safety improvements. So how does it get delivered? So basically the seller or listing agent provides the advisory to the buyer. You, as a seller, would want to have a copy of that. And usually through escrow, is often bundled with a natural hazard disclosure report or giving as a separate California statewide buyer and seller advisory attachment. It doesn't require the signatures in all cases, but best practice is to have both parties acknowledge receipt to confirm that it was properly delivered. I'd like to emphasize why these disclosures are so important. First, they offer you legal protection. Given these advisories and disclosures fulfills part of the seller's and agent's legal duty to disclose known hazards. It creates, number two, it creates safety awareness. It educates the buyer about the real risks specific to California wildfire zones. Number three, it provides insurance clarity with increasing insurance restrictions in fire-prone areas. The advisory helps buyers understand why coverage might cost more or require mitigation work. And finally, number four, transaction smoothness. If this advisory isn't given, it can delay escrow or create compliance issues later on. So in a nutshell, the Wildfire Advisory educates buyers about the risk and responsibility of owning property in fire-prone zones. And the Fire Hardening and Defensible Space Disclosure tells buyers the current condition and features of the home that relates to fire safety. Both work together to protect both buyer and seller and keep the transaction fully compliant under California disclosure laws. Fire disclosure, they are a powerful protection tool for both sellers and buyers in California. If this helps you understand wildfire and home hardening disclosure, check out my next videos in the California disclosure series, where I break down other key real estate disclosures that every seller should know. This is Maria Horat, California real estate broker with Gold Country Properties. Thanks for watching and see you next time.